Welcome to episode 319 of the Board Game Barbecue podcast, brought to you by our awesome Patreons. Actually, we have one of our awesome patrons with us tonight, as a matter of fact, which we'll talk about in a second. But we've also been brought to you by Advent Games and More Than Meeples, two amazing Australian board gaming stores. Go check those guys out. They're very active in the community as well, which is great to see. They support our game days and everything. So yeah, please check their sites out, check out their socials. They're all run by totally top-class people. I'm also joined by my Shrek, because I am the donkey and you are the Shrek. So how are we doing, Shrek?
I'm good, thanks, donkey. I'm doing well. I'm doing well for a Saturday morning, and there's a reason why we're recording on a Saturday morning. As you said, we're joined by they're a patron. They're also a good friend, but they've also been on a previous episode as well.
Yeah. Episode 139. Go back and listen to that. Beautiful episode. If you want to know about all things asymmetric, I will tell you this special guest that we have with us today. It is none other than Carl Van Ostrand, coming from us from the US of A. How you doing, Carl?
Doing well. Thank you, Donkey and Shrek. Much appreciated for the intro. It's really good to be back. I can't believe it's been 3 years or more than 3 years since I've been able to hang out with you guys. So thank you. It's good to know that I'm welcome back, too, that I didn't make any terrible errors that took me off the list.
Carl, yeah. If terrible errors kept you off the show, neither me or Adrian would still be on here. I think that's fair.
I don't think any of us would be on this, actually, to be fair. But then that was all the way back in September 2021. Like, that feels so long ago.
I know. I was just a young designer at the time. Now I'm all grown up.
Are you, though? Like, really? Like, are you actually grown up?
That's a complete lie. I still have a lot of work to do on that front. Yeah.
So how have you been, Carl? What's been going on? What's the latest? What have you been up to in the design space?
Yeah, I don't stop. I mean, I've been busy. I've got a bunch of things I've been working on. I mean, we can cover some of them. I'd love to. But let's see. I had the most recent delivery of Bardwood Grove, which was the last game to hit doorsteps. Yeah. We've got the Merchant's Cove Mastercraft expansions, not too far off, fingers crossed, can't wait. I did a Draconis 8 TCG, which was the most recent Kickstarter that just wrapped up like a couple weeks ago. I've got a couple more coming out that I can't talk about because I'm not allowed to, which I always get frustrated about, but I understand why I can't talk about them. So yeah, I've been busy in an awesome way. I think you guys know this is like for many designers, this is my side gig. It's my favorite escape. It's what I do to have fun. So it's awesome. I've been good. Thank you for asking.
Hey, Carl, obviously massive fan of your work. I think I've frothed and fanboyed over you the last time you're on the show. So I'm lucky I've got to double up. You've had Merchant's Cove come out, which I adored, and Bardwood Grove, which is a nice change of pace from that. Talk to us about Draconis and the fact that it's a TCG and what sort of inspired you to go down that route.
Yeah, you ready for a little bit of story time?
Hell yeah, story time with Carl, baby.
All right, so why would I make or even want to design a TCG, right? And I'll come back to this because it's not quite a TCG. And as a designer, I do weird things on purpose. Like I like bucking trends, right? Like that's part of what excites me to get motivated to work on something. So I'll come back to that. But little story, when I was actually young, like post-college, I lucked into a design setting for an actual CCG, as in like heyday of CCGs. Everyone was trying to take down Magic the Gathering. My first official published game was a long time ago, like 2004, 2005, in the CCG mayhem. And I loved it. I mean, some of my first gaming was collectible card games and head-to-head style card games. So I've always had that in the back. It wasn't until I got older that I started loving Euros and getting into other, really deep diving like many of us have over the past decade into the wonderful world that we have today. But the story is there. Like I've always had it in my blood. I like collecting things. I don't think it's that taboo. I understand there's some problems with the industry. I think there's some issues with it, but that's why I wanted to design one. So the whole point behind Draconis 8 was to make something that retained a collectible aspect, because that part is fun. Discovering new cards is fun. I think you guys had Richard Garfield on. I think he talked about this, right? Like there's a original element to Magic that was really about discovery and not so much about chasing rares. And he accomplished that. And it was its own popularity that ended up sort of corroding it over time. So I thought, well, technology has advanced. How could I make a game that's both collectible, but sort of fair, as in you didn't have to go chase rares unless you wanted to, fully optional. So getting away from this more like loot box gambling system and thinking more about how can we make a fair TCG that if you want to collect it, you can. If you just want to buy the starter kit, you can. I'll pause there, but that was the inspiration. I've always wanted to do that, but it wasn't until recently that technology would allow for that to even really happen. The closest comparison would be Keyforge, right? Would that be the most recent sort of thing I'd compare it to? So yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I think when I saw the Kickstarter campaign and you posted on our Discord, I was immediately drawn to Keyforge and the randomization of the decks and the fact that you could just buy a deck and play it. That is really what got me and my brothers into MTG. We would, and I've talked about this on the show numerous times. It would be like Christmas time or the release of a new set. We'd go and grab them or a new block, and we would just grab whatever. Like I was always red and green. My brother was, blue and black, and then my other brother was a combination of all three. And then also my dad, when he was around, was involved in that too. He was a nasty blue and white player. But
oh, good.
I too have been chasing that feeling, and I've recently dipped my toes back in with Lorcana over the thanks to PAX, and I've also played Altered. So, talk about the technology behind this, because not mentioning too many other ones, but Keyforge, that was a big sort of shift as well. That unique, hey, you can buy the deck, and the deck's all there. So, talk to us a little bit about the technology that you've used behind Draconis.
Yeah, sure. And I'm with you. Like, I also think there's a resurgence in a good way of people rethinking this, right? Like you mentioned Lorcana and Altered. I've played both of those. I'm having fun playing them. I don't necessarily feel the need to go on massive chase hunts. So I'm not the only one that I think sort of wants this to change, and other publishers and games are doing that. Also, you mentioned Christmas. Yeah. Is there anything more fun to get in a stocking than a booster pack? I mean, come on. That's the best. Yeah, what I was getting at there was in Draconis, it's even more accessible, right? We took even more steps towards making this a game that you could literally buy a booster pack and have a full playable deck. So the pack is the deck. They are equal. And we're talking about 8 cards here. So your deck is comprised of 1 dragon, who's sort of like your champion, and 7 other creatures that are essentially your army. When I was referring to the tech, I guess nothing too crazy, but you need an algorithm to generate and balance the cards in such a way that I could create an endless supply of unique cards. And I use the word endless a little loosely. It's not quite infinity, but it's darn close. So unlike Keyforge, you will essentially never see the same card twice in Draconis. And I don't think that part has done before. I'm sure someone will slap me with a correction if I'm wrong. But I don't believe there's a game where you can say, hey, all 8 cards that you ever open in any pack will be completely unique, which means every deck is unique and every card, asterisk is unique. So that was the tech I was referring to, is the ability to print an endless supply of completely unique cards was hard to do. And also getting them automatically uploaded into an app where you can scan the back of the card and the entire randomly generated pack ends up in your digital app. That is relatively new as well. I think Altered has something very similar. So the combination of these aspects, I was like, wait, I think we can pull this off. And if we make an algorithm that balances the cards equally, then you should always feel like you have a balanced set of cards, and you can just go chase down the art or the dragon or the abilities that you like and search through it in a sort of casual, non-pressure, pay-to-win sort of way. So yeah, that was the goal.
With the sort of influx and resurgence of things like Lorcana and Altered, and obviously the infinite Magic the Gathering that never goes, it's always funny, right? So Magic the Gathering started off as quite basic, yeah, and it evolved and evolved and evolved. And kind of same with Lorcana, that's already starting to evolve quite heavily, even having a solo mode and you guys versus a boss mode. We're at this really nice renaissance of these types of games. do you see it going up from here and more technology integrated and more interesting mechanisms, and to try and keep it fresh? Do you feel that we're already there?
I think my gamble, my personal take, is that to increase it, to go up, as you're saying, you need to increase accessibility. I think one sort of small issue with TCGs is they're hard to just get into. Some of them are actually relatively complicated. You don't just jump into Flesh and Blood. It's a pretty tough game. You don't just jump into Magic that easily either, frankly. Now, you see Lorcana, that took a step back towards accessibility, in my opinion. Great move. So I think the key to broadening the market is to make a game that's tactically deep, but super accessible for your wallet, for the teach, to sit down and have one in your pocket and just play a game, and not have the intense pressure that a lot of like high skill TCGs bring with them sort of naturally. It seems like the TCG market forgot to make an accessible game. A lot of people compare Draconis 8 to Triple Triad from Final Fantasy. So for any fans that are familiar with that game, I mean, great little card game in a digital format, ironically sitting in a Final Fantasy video game, right? But super accessible, where I think I might have, had people telling me they played that more than the actual game, the card game within the RPG, right?
Like Gwent in The Witcher 3.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a brilliance to just having a simple game, and it can still be tactical and still have several layers of strategic depth. So I think that's how you grow.
You mentioned the growth and how Lorcana took a step back. It's obviously working for them, because Lorcana was the biggest stand at PAX by a long way. And me and Connor got in the queue on the Friday morning, and I couldn't see the end of the queue. Do you know what I mean? There was so many people there to get into it, and it was constantly full of people learning to play the game. Like, it was full all day. We never walked past there, and there was dead tables. Like, it was, and I'm talking like at least 30 tables, Con, maybe more.
Oh yeah. And it was absolutely, as we say in Australia, chockers, just jam packed.
Same. At PAX U is the same thing. Sorry, Connor.
Yeah. No. I was just going to say, you make a really interesting point about the inaccessibility of games like Magic. I've played a little bit of Flesh and Blood. My brothers have played a bit more, because I talk about Magic in a way that I kind of reminisce about the good times and all that type of stuff. And it's not to me that the good times are gone, but when I don't know if you're similar to me, when you try and step back in, there's all these new keywords and I guess they're cool mechanics and people like to play with them. But I was explaining this to Dana when we were playing Altered, in that I am familiar with a lot of the terminology. It might not be the same thing, right? They probably use other terms in other games, and you've probably done it with Draconis, but you get the same vibe. So you talked about the 8 cards maximum in your deck, and the fact that you've got the dragon. What else makes Draconis more accessible, you feel, than Magic and other games like the Final Fantasy card game or Flesh and Blood? What makes it more accessible than those ones?
Yeah, I wrestle with that same thing, by the way, with Magic. I can't tell if I just have a barrier with nostalgia and I'm like, I just can't get over my own nostalgia factor, or if it actually is just harder to get into and I don't want to learn all the new stuff.
Have you guys just got old? Like, you're just old.
That's also fair.
I still play Magic the Gathering. I still play Call of Duty, and I don't know what else I still play. Like, I can never get old. Let's face it.
That's right.
All right, Peter.
So to get that question, so there's a couple of things. I mean, one that I don't think's been done that also makes it accessible in a slightly different way is there's no text. There's no card text to read. So, I mean, I've also, if you listen to a newer player at the table playing a TCG, because I'm always listening like passively. You hear people say like, man, I have to read all the cards in my hand. In Draconis, you don't do that. There's some abilities that you'll learn very quickly, but it's also a tile laying game more than it is a sort of like my army going against your army on the other side type of thing. So being completely language independent, never having to really stop and read a card, that makes it accessible from a learning standpoint. But it also means that I could play someone in Japan with the exact same deck and not have any barriers there. So there's a lot of ways to think about accessibility, but when you talk about growth and bringing new people into the hobby and letting them experience a collectible card game, a trading card game, whichever you prefer, those are things we were talking about during development and design of Draconis.
Let's shift gears just a little bit. We said before we jumped on, we weren't going to grill you, but I just feel like
It's
you've
too
got.
interesting.
I know.
It's
I was
too
going to say the same
interesting not
thing.
to listen to.
And you've got for someone who, I think Mitch even made a comment to be like, is Carl like one of the hottest game designers like around at the moment in terms of like your ideas are really fresh and things like that. So Carl just winced, by the way.
Yeah,
I think I made him cringe a little bit.
Yeah.
The process of Kickstarter and crowdfunding, you've gone back to it with Draconis. You've had Merchants Cove, which was in my hands before I interviewed you last time. At the time, you were launching Bardwood Grove, and you've also then gone back to Merchants Cove with the expansions. What have you learnt over your time? I love asking game designers this. What have you learnt with crowdfunding, and why are you sticking with crowdfunding over maybe going straight to a publisher, or has that changed?
So is the question, why do I choose to go to crowdfunding personally as opposed to self-publishing? Is that what you mean?
I guess so. Yeah, that's probably a good way to phrase it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so I like designing because the publishers that I've been lucky enough to work with are better at publishing than I could ever be, especially for the games that I'm trying to design. I don't know. I did actually crowdfund some self-published Kapow, which was the first game I ever really dipped my toes into this market with, and we did fund. But then Wise Wizard took it over and did a much better job than we could. So sometimes it's like letting the experts do the expert stuff and knowing what you're good at. That's not to say we wouldn't try self-publishing again. There's a lot of upside to it, but there's a lot of know-how in terms of how do you market, how do you build an audience, how do you do a great job at customer service, how do you handle fulfillment, right? You guys probably know this, but it's like wearing 45 different hats instead of just having to worry about the design. So I think, I'll show my hand a little bit. I've also always wanted to make a game that my wife and child would play with me, or my mom and dad. And so given the smaller profile of the small box game idea that my buddy and I had, Doug, you don't know Doug, but he's awesome. He was a co-designer on Kapow with Larry, my other friend. We may take that back to self-publish that because we feel like it's something we can actually do. It's a sort of a labor of love, but we also think it's a small enough game that we could probably pull it off where take one look at the insert on Mastercraft, and I'm like, no, I'm not smart enough to figure that out.
I'm totally hanging out for that, by the way. I'd love all the toys of Merchants Cove, and I can't wait to get my hands on some more. Just give me give the crowd a little bit of insight into a couple of the different merchants that are going to be available for that, if that's okay.
I'd love to. Yeah, there's some great ones. So the first thing was that some of the feedback we got is like, hey, can you take the skill level of the merchant and either go as high as the Oracle or like roughly around the Oracle and go a little bit up or the same. So that was the goal. We have a baker that I spent quite a bit of time on that is a love letter to Zolkin with the gears. So the gears are essentially the mixers of the baker, if you're thinking about it from a top-down perspective, with a little conveyor belt oven where she's making cupcakes. So that I'm pretty excited about. I spent a lot of time on that one. Drake made a mushroom farmer. Super cool. There's a detective. So yeah, which one am I most excited about? I don't know. It's always so hard to pick, and it's so hard until you've actually sat there and played them with all the different modules and everything. But I think I put the most personal time into the baker, so I'm probably a little biased on that one.
Yeah, it's always a game that people say to me, "Oh, you really like Merchants Cove, don't you?" I say, "I love it, and I'd love to teach it." I think I've taught it to most people. Definitely taught it to 80. I taught it to Mitch, or the artist formerly known as Mitch, of course, as we refer to him now. And I was in that same time that I was talking to you about with when I was hanging at Mitch's. They were like, "Do you want to play Merchants Cove?" And I was like, "I do, but we just need a lot of time." And then it was getting later in the night. And I was like, So I sort of made a pact. I was like, next time we're all together, I'm definitely going to teach it to you guys. And hopefully by then I'll have my hands on the expansion, hopefully, so I can show them the baker or the detective. And I loved just exploring and trying to work out the best strategy for for the different merchants. And I thought the solo component was very easy to play as.
Yeah, the Peddler's an awesome little module.
Yeah.
I can't take credit for that. That was Johnny and Drake. But
yeah.
I'm with you. I have a fun Merchant's Cove story. I was up at Carnage. This is always one of my favorite parts of designing. Carnage Con is a 500-person small con up in, Killington? Wonderful, like snow-style resort in the Northeast. And it's one of these teach and learn style cons, which I love, because basically you book a time and you basically, if you want to, can just have back-to-back people teach you new games. And I was looking at the available games and I was like, whoa, someone's doing Merchant's Cove, which for a smaller con, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So
did you undercover boss him?
I did. Like I was
amazing.
I figured, because it's all timed, right? I could see the calendar. I was like, oh, it's going to be at 7:00. If I emerge from the bathroom right behind his table when he's doing it, I can sneak up on him and be there. So I walked up behind him and I said, hey, I was at Merchant's Cove, and this guy was teaching it, and people were sitting down to just get going. I said, oh, I designed that. He didn't believe me, right? Because I guess that is a little bit weird. He's like, well, what? Like, prove it. And I said, like, here's my name on my badge, and then check out the box. So we had this really funny, like, awkward interaction. We ended up chatting for 20 minutes at the table about it. And it was such a cool experience to just see someone else from afar enjoying the game and teaching other people. That's always like the most redeeming thing about being a designer.
I thought you were going to say you booked into the game, sat down, and decimated them all, and then told them who you were. Like, you just completely floored everybody, and then was like, "Yeah, well, I designed that." So
what would have ended up happening is I would have sat down, thought I was going to beat everyone, gotten my ass kicked, and then been like, "Guess what? I made the game."
My name's Johnny Pack. I gotta go. Just lie about who you were.
What would you say your name was again? Drake, and then bail out of it.
Yeah, that's right. See you later.
Oh, that's so cool. We aren't in that kind of space, but we do run events and that, and just seeing other people enjoying games is the fun and the passion is infectious. Like you just absorb all that energy, and everyone's having a great time around you. It's something so cool. It's different to the video gaming thing. I think that, I probably have aged out of LAN parties and things like that. I mean, even though Connor and I do play a fair bit of Overwatch together, but it's just not the same. It's not the same as sitting across the table from somebody else. And when you're in a room of people doing that, it's just something cool. Like, it's just so nice to see.
I love it. Those weekends always go by way too fast. Yeah, it's
100%. They like it. Yeah. They just blink and then they're done.
We've quite often, like if we've caught up as a big group, and even with other members of the community, we keep going, I wish we had one more day to hang out and do stuff together, or one more day, or that we should have played that one other game, or you go, oh, that's what we were supposed to play. We totally forgot about it, because you just get caught up in it. And even games that you don't necessarily rate that highly, they create these funny stories. Like, there's been multiple times with me and Adrian where we've had an absolute blast playing a game together, and it's had nothing to do with the actual game itself. It's just been us just hanging out and being silly, I guess.
That's it. There's something super infectious about that when there's multiple tables of games around you. Yeah, we had a big game of Xenoshift at Carnage, and it was nice. Not like the best game ever, but it felt like the best game ever because we were like feeling all the energy around us, and it ended up being a really tight game. And yeah, I don't know. That's not like I would give the game a perfect 10, but it felt like a perfect 10 in that environment. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah, nice. If I could take a slight sidestep here for a tiny little story that I'd like to sort of share with you. Indeed. I entered another barrage tournament on BGA, right? Because you know what? It's a nice regular way to play the game on the move, right? And I was like, sweet as, I did this before. I didn't do terribly. I got to the third round or something. So, I played maybe 20 odd people, and, I did reasonably well. I was happy, and I learned a lot, which was great. So I decided to sign up to another tournament, and I loaded up BGA, and it said you had 9+ games or actions to take. And I was like, oh, that must be wrong. Like, what's happened there? And then I opened it up, And it turns out that you play the entire round simultaneously over 5 days. So you have to play 14 games of Barrage at the same time.
Oh, come
Now,
on. What?
yeah. I actually was like, I'm not doing this. How do you quit? Like, I couldn't even figure out how to leave the tables because I'm not a massive user of BG. I don't know all the ins and outs. And let's put it this way, I've never actively quit a table, so I didn't really know what I was doing. So I took a couple of actions because some other people did, and then all of a sudden I found that I've played 9 of the 14 games because I just couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop clicking and playing and trying to take a good turn. But one of the games was interesting in the fact that one of the players that I'm playing against, his name's Ferion. He has an ELO of 321. Now, for those who don't know, ELO is some sort of rating system to say how many games you've won. And as you beat other players, you progressively get a higher ELO. In comparison, mine's only a 138, right, to his 321. So he beats me, right, in DPS. However, I took the first action in that game. I just took the first action and I was like, I'll take this. I'll try this because I've got these different elements in the game. I'll take this turn. To which I received the following messages. Hi. Probably you realized yourself that your first move was a critical mistake and you now cannot build a single base in the first round. I did not know that joining this tournament, you have to play 15 games at the same time in parallel, which is too much for me. However, I do not want to drop my ELO for this reason. If you share my view about your winning chances, you don't want to continue, as also you have parallel games in play. Why not think about putting all your guys in the bank each round so we can finish this quickly?
Whoa.
Hopefully this does not come across as arrogant from my part. Just want to save us time. So,
no. Not arrogant at all. Yeah.
No, not at all. I was a bit like blown away about it. So I couldn't figure out how to handle it or what to say. So I've just started to reply with Slipknot lyrics for fun. And my first one was, if I'm not alone, I cannot hate. I don't deserve to have you. And he hasn't replied in 3 days.
That'll keep him on his toes. Yeah.
Man, like, how rude. It was my first action. Like, come on.
I think he's just done that. He has no faith in his own gameplay. He just sends it out to everyone, hoping to call their bluff and being like, well, if I'm playing 14 games and 3 of them just go, oh, fair enough, and do it, then that's 3 more games he would have won than if he played them out.
Wow. I'm going to need to hear how this ends, both with the Slipknot near lyrics and also is he bluffing or is he not? Yeah.
Can I beat him? Well, yeah, it didn't really actively annoy me. It just made me laugh and then made me think like the hobby has a long way to go sometimes in some of these kind of elements. Like, and I've had altercations with people in board games. People have been rude to me to my face in my earlier board game sort of hobby experiences, but I've never really experienced that on a constant level. So everyone else I've always hung around with and played games with has been really pleasant, really had a great laugh. I've never played a game with someone that I'm like, oh God, I can never play a game with that person again. How rude. But I would assume that this does happen around in the hobby, but yeah, I just don't see it. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, getting that message, I was just like, what?
Yeah,
so,
it's incredible. I mean, super alpha move, and a little odd. I could balance that a little bit with a positive interaction if you want.
Go, please.
One of the coolest things about the Draconis Kickstarter, and you guys may know, Kickstarter comment sections can be tough sometimes, right? Because you're trying to do your best to react, but it can be tough to meet all the demand. Great story from Draconis was within the Discord channel, we started a Wise Wizards sub-channel for Draconis. And I just want to actually kind of do a public thanks to these individuals. There was 3 or 4 people, with a couple in particular, that were such kind, communicative, helpful, like the right kind of feedback type of people hanging out in the Wise Wizard Discord, truly helping make the game better during the Kickstarter. That to me is like what it's all about, both as a designer, but also kind of to your point, as like having a good positive experience with people is usually the way it goes for me. I'd say it's the majority of the time, but sometimes you do get a curveball. But it was just so cool that these folks were as interested in the game as they were to take the time to write sentence after sentence and go back and forth with me on the game and some ways to improve it. So I just thought that was like super, super nice backer experience that I actually had never had before, because it was the first time I was hanging out in a Discord while the campaign was live. So anyway, public shout out to those people who I can't wait to actually play a game with. One of them is going to be at PAX U in Philly, and we're gonna play a game together. So anyway, that's a other side of the coin.
That's awesome. And look, and I think one of the reasons why Adrian, without putting words in his mouth, is because it's such a rare case for you to have those experiences. By and large, have had positive experiences in this hobby, to the point where it makes you to come back or play those games online and things like that. We would be remiss if we didn't get some questions from some of your fellow members of the BBQ pit. So I might quickly run through these, and then maybe we'll chat about some games afterwards. Cool. So from Dryfly Stephen, shout out to Dryfly. He asks, when it comes to design, do your game ideas start with theme or mechanisms or something else? And how do you overcome the barriers that come with keeping true to the starting point and incorporating depth, balance, playability, and appeal to the market?
Wow, that started off as one of those questions I've heard before, and then it just kept getting harder.
He leveled it up.
Yeah,
he just leveled it up, mate.
He's a clever man. He's a clever man.
Try to do that some justice. So the theme or mechanism thing is sort of something as a designer we've usually been asked, and I think I've come to the conclusion that it's neither, or it's both. I don't know which way to say it better, but when I get motivated enough to go like, all right, I'm going to go spend 1,000 hours for free working on this, it's because there's something unique about a nearly instantaneous thought that says this mechanism and this theme works so well together that it'll basically riff off itself into a full game. Or at least the chances of that are high enough where I'm going to see how far I can bring this riff, right? If you got like a drum riff, right? So it feels strong enough that I can keep this solo going, and it's just going to keep working, that this mechanism plus this theme gel enough to continue. To the second part of the question around basically how do you smash down those barriers when they keep raising up, that's where you basically just put in the hours, right? Like sometimes that riff keeps going and then you hit a stall and you're like, oh man, this part would work great, but it doesn't quite make sense in the environment of the theme. So how are we going to pull it off? You might have to rewind, jump that wall, try a new approach, tear a couple pillars down, build them back up. But generally speaking, I'm not going full on into an endeavor unless I think there's like a special synergy that almost happened in my head. Bardwood is a good example of that, where I had the tempo dial mechanism combined with the concept of bards. And I was like, thematically, I need a bard game. Mechanism-wise, I have this dial-based tempo mechanism. Those are going to work together. Let's start riffing, right? So that would be an example. Merchant's Cove 2 is just almost on a piece of paper conceptually during a brainstorm session in a single car ride home from a friend's house, right? So it's like they kind of happen in special moments for me.
Awesome. So this one here, so I'll just quickly shout out to our buddy Draven. So you kind of answered this. He sort of said, what is the process of balancing something like Draconis 8 where every deck is unique? You sort of talked about this already. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to it.
Yeah, I guess I did kind of cover it. I'll go a little more detail. So every card in Draconis has 4 sides with a value on it and a speed. If you think about the simplest way to balance that, you can take a hard value and divide it by 4 and give a value to each side, and then also assign a speed between 1 and 20. The question becomes, if something that's faster is better, how do you detract from the card's power by subtracting from its battlefield strength around the 4 sides? That's the core of the balancing system. What gets really wacky is all of the other things you can't account for, such as there's a 4x4 grid. So there are edges that get lost. If you're going first, you must also see the other person's card, so you have more information. So that's even more advantage than just the point you gain from going first. So the only way to solve those impossible balancing issues is data, testing, which was really cool because we could do a lot of that on the app. But that's the core of it. 4 sides, 1 speed, deducting a cost for each special ability that the cards have. That's the essence of the balance. Every card can be balanced in that manner.
That is, yep. You
That's
told me you didn't
deep.
have much more to add, and you went and added it to us. So you're a liar. From Jonathan, shout out to my fellow Victorian brother, Jonathan. Is there a genre / type of game you wouldn't think of creating? I think he was working on something LCG, TCG-ish. So it might have been Draconis. So would you rather... So there's 2 parts to this. I'm sort of butchering Jonathan's question here, which you'll hate because he's an English teacher. So A, wouldn't be interested in designing, or B, would be interested in designing but hasn't figured out how to make it work yet.
Can definitely do A. Like I know that I would be bad at making a party game, deduction game, or dexterity game. Just know I wouldn't be good at it. I'm like not that fun to be around or exciting. And those games,
stop it, man! You're having a blast with you. What are you talking about?
All those things require like, I don't know. I don't feel like I could put myself into those games successfully like another designer could. So that would be probably where I'd stay away from. What was the second part again? I need to hear it again.
Is there something that you're interested in, but you haven't quite figured out how to make it work yet?
Oh man, you'll like this actually. Yeah, one of the games that's sort of, I don't know, middle burner for me is a cooperative. I love cooperative games. I've never designed one. I will. It's like I'll do it before I die. But what I'm struggling with is the big thing I'm trying to, quote unquote, fix in co-op. Conor, I'd love your take on this, obviously, because I know you're a big co-op guy. I think there's potentially a better / different way to end a cooperative game that isn't simply pass, fail, go redo it. As in, like, what other ways could we finish a cooperative scenario that don't simply end in you passed or you failed, and if you failed, you got to retry it. I am midway through this incredible journey of figuring that out. It's complicated, but I'm making pretty good ground. The only template I really have, there's a couple games like Sleeping Gods that sort of does a fail forward approach. Mythwind has taken an approach of like sandboxing. So that's one thing. I think I'm answering this question. Like that's what I want to do that I haven't done yet. That's like the thing I want to accomplish.
Yeah, I guess. Thanks for asking me the question too, Jonathan. The fail forward is definitely something that I like in gaming. Sometimes there's variations of it, right? So, for example, Oathsworn, you redo it, but you become back more powerful. So there's a higher chance that you will pass it the next time. Or if you fail something, then you do fail forward. I'm wondering if it's, and again, without ever designing a game, if it's you still have like this pass-fail system, but it's graded. So
I know what you mean. Almost, would you almost mean like a choose your own adventure type thing? So
that's right.
You get to, let's just say there's 4 outcomes, right, to the end. You fail or pass on some sort of a scale, and depending where you sit on that scale is what happens next.
Yes.
So, this is such a good pub conversation. I wish we had more time. I could go on for this forever. I actually, about 2 years ago when I started doing this, I messaged, you guys know Mike Delisio from the Dice Tower. He's a co-op guy as well. And I messaged him. I'm like, do you think this is possible? And his response to me was so invigorating because he said, I think it's doable. Like, you should try to go for it. That was like 2 years ago, and I'm still working on it. But it's essentially what you just described, which is a spectrum or a matrix of conclusions or scores that give you a net result. The sort of cursed problem is you don't want to reward people for losing because there's sort of an incentive to lose. And if you punish people too hard for losing, then they're also going to be set back and lose again.
Yeah.
There's these really tough cursed problems that come up, but I'm going to do it. It's an awesome question.
Cool. Also, one question that's not strictly from a Patreon per se, but I was having a bit of a conversation with a fellow asymmetric god as yourself in Sam McDonald. Yeah, and he basically we were discussing different things about asymmetry, and I mentioned that you were coming on the show.
Can we pause for a second? You said asymmetric god. Carl does not have like one side of his face, and neither does Sam that's higher or lower than the other. Adrian's referring to the game design aspects.
Yeah,
Got it.
Exactly. But he kind of sort of spawned this question in our discussion. He said basically, do you want asymmetry to only change how the player plays, or do you want it to change how the opponents play to that player?
Holy smokes. Wow. Did you answer that? Or was he just fronting it as an amazing question?
No. I was just asking questions, and then he was asking questions, and then he wrote that, and I was like, I got no idea. That's why you get the asymmetric god status. I got no idea.
I mean, in many ways, when I think about Merchant's Cove, it's really the former. It's like you're, and that's on purpose, right? In that particular setting, it's the way the player plays is essentially what changes, and we purposely didn't want that to impact or require that other players know how you play to sort of engage with them. I don't necessarily think that's right or wrong. I think they just both have different ups and downs, challenges, pros and cons. It's interesting. Again, I can't necessarily divulge too much, but one of the big asymmetric projects I'm on right now does much more of the latter than the former, again, on purpose. I don't think there's like a right or wrong answer here. I think both can be great. I do think the latter is more challenging, though. I think when you have the desire to have what everyone else is doing be asymmetric with each individual player, that creates a lot of threads. And you get into player count issues where, like, what if this guy's not in the game? This part won't matter as much, and that's going to devalue this player, right? So, super cool question. Could probably go on for way too long.
Well, with that, I think we'll move on to some sizzling games, if that's all right with everybody.
Hi there, it's Dana Banana from the Board Game Barbecue, and if you listen to the podcast, you'll know that I love a new board game smell. So when I'm in need of a new aroma, the best place to go is to head to Advent Games. They have a huge range of games from pre-orders to in-stock games. Actually, I don't think there's a store that can match their variety. Dean, the owner, is fantastic, and if I'm after a particular game, he's always so responsive. So if you're after a new board game smell, make sure you go to adventgames.com.au.
I'll just jump straight in first and say that I've been playing Windmill Valley and I loved it. I don't know if you had the chance to play this yet. Carl, have you played it, Con?
I haven't. Every time I went to play it at PlayCon, the tables were full. Now, that's not an excuse, but I'm using it as an excuse.
Well, I was very lucky to go to a local library game day in Ashgrove, and Ben Todd was there, and he taught it at PlayCon about 10 times, but never played it himself. So we instantly got to sit down, and he knew like 95% of the rules. We read a few little bits that we had to clarify, and then we moved straight into the game. And I have to say, like, credit where credit's due. It's so smooth. Like, it is smooth to play. It's a very interesting action selection Euro where you have these two cogs that intertwine into each other, one having 5 slots and the other having 6 slots. I know that Jules and Mitch have spoken about this already in the past, but in each of these sort of slots on your cogs, you can add these extra actions in and power them up so that you're able to take 2 actions at the same time, one from one cog, one from the other cog. And yeah, I mean, it blew me away at how you can add all these different actions, but nothing broke the game. There was nothing at one point where I was like, that's too powerful. What you're doing there is going to make it so that I'm probably going to lose this. I felt like I had a dog in the fight the whole time. I never thought that someone had a more powerful situation than me, apart from the first game I played where I got decimated, but that was my own fault because I just didn't really gel with the game. But yeah, I was really blown away at the production quality. How clear and concise the graphic design is great. It's very bold. It's very bright. It's definitely a medium weight game, but like on the real sort of lower end of that, if I'm honest, because and that's no disrespect to the game. It's just so clear and so easy to play and so concise in what you're doing that it's a brain burn and you've got to think and you're doing all these cool actions and adding different things to your wheels. But there's never a point where I was confused about the rules or there was an ambiguous rule where I was like, oh, what does that mean? What does this mean? how does this work? It's very clear, and that's made the game so much smoother to play.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that, Adrian, with opaqueness in games. Like a lot of the time, and some people enjoy this because it adds into decision making, but knowing how strong a power is or how it's going to affect you or when's the best time to use this, that can add to the strategy. But also if you're teaching people who aren't used to those, without sounding too gatekeeper, those high-level decisions, sometimes it can bog them down and increase their AP. So having that really clear, hey, this is when this power is good, or this is how this is going to change my style of game, I think that's really important.
Yeah,
it's cool. I've seen the pictures of that, and every time I look at it, just from afar, I'm like, I need to play that. But I haven't gotten to it. I heard you guys talking about it again, and I was like, geez, I need to find someone who has a copy of that. So
yeah. It's essentially, the theme is you're a tulip farmer. It's set in the Windmill Valley, and it's got an actual name to it, which I can't find, a historical space. It's set in Holland, and it's just so, yeah, it's a really strange one because its decision space is hard. Like, you have to constantly think, but you never feel, like you said, kind of bogged down or overwhelmed. Like, I don't get to because of the way the wheel moves and what you're kind of stuck with, you don't on your turn hold a meeple and go, okay, cool, I've got 10 choices. Which choice am I going to make? You've got very limited choices because the way the wheels and the actions move around in those cogs, you've only really got 2 or 3 spaces that you can move that wheel. So you kind of, you know what's coming up, and you can sort of pre-plan as well, and you can kind of count out, okay, well, when the left-hand wheel is at this position, that means the right-hand wheel's here, so I'm going to add this action in so that in 2 actions time, I get this with this action, and they're going to combo in together really well, and I'll get a really awesome turn. But you won't get that awesome turn again, because when the wheel spins all the way around, that 5th wheel, the one with the 5 sections, will never meet again with the 6 section wheel, because then it's then 1 space behind itself. And that's just really, super interesting and super clever. And the fact that next time, okay, cool, I'm going to take the action from the right-hand wheel because it's got the more powerful action, and then sort of bounce back between the 2 sides. It's just brilliant. It's, like I said, I can't explain enough how smooth it is to play. So if you want to try a medium game, or if you've got a bunch of friends that are gamers that, you know, they generally sort of stick to the light games and you'd like to introduce them to a medium weight game, this is a great one. This is a really, really good game for that. There's no direct conflict or area control, so that's very passive. You can, when you build windmills out on the map, you can piggyback off other people's actions, so you can then place a windmill adjacent to someone else's windmill, so they've kind of paved the road for you, but you don't steal their spaces, or, you know, you can't really mess them up in any kind of a way. Really loved it. Super smooth. Played it at 2 players 3 or 4 times, played it at 4 players, and it's great. And it's really good at 2 as well, because like I said, how smooth the actions are, the fact that the 2 wheels have to interlock into each other, you know what you have to do. I can only do this and this, boom, 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 done. Cool, your turn. And it's back to the other player. And it's just backwards and forwards like that. And I really enjoy those games, especially when there's no high level interaction in a game. I find that playing something like this at 2 players is almost preferable for time reasons. So,
well, you don't have that lull, I guess, when it's not your turn.
Correct.
And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about what games sort of overstay their welcome when it comes to player number, and a lot of the feedback was, and Joe made a comment that lots of design companies or production companies want, and Carl, you can probably attest to this, we want a 5 or 6 player expansion, but in reality, not many games, especially if they're mid to heavyweight games, play well at more than 3 or 4. So that's good that you can play it at 2 and it feels quite snappy.
Yeah.
Yeah, snappy is the word, right? Like I would even admit, like Bardwood could technically be played at 5, but I wouldn't like recommend it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's just a point where if you have the crunch on one side of a good strategic turn, as soon as you have 4 or 5 players in it, you're just adding downtime at that point. And there are some people that I think rightfully just don't want to be sitting around for 10 minutes waiting for their turn. So.
Or if you're done and you go and do some housework in between your turns, but just fair enough. Like it.
Totally.
Connor, what about yourself?
What about me? Oh, thanks, Adi.
Save the best to last, mate.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. Yes. So I've talked about this game before, but briefly, because I hadn't played. I'd sort of dipped my toes into it, and that's a little bit of a pun. So it's Conservas. It's a game by Scott Arms, who is of the Tiny Epic fame, and also Air, Land and Sea, that Combat he won. So apologies if I forgot that one wrong, Scotty. But he has designed a solo game. So Conservas is a solo game. You only play it by yourself, if in case you didn't know what solo games were. And I've sizzled this game in respect to our long-lost friend Mitch, who was the king of solo games on our podcast. What you're doing in Conservas is you're running a canning program, a canning company, where you're canning fish. And I haven't looked into it too much, but I believe the whole idea is for you to fish and then can, and then also for it to be sustainable. So what you're battling with is fishing and gaining money and getting the fish that you need, but also conserving the stock that exists within the ocean. So the way that the turns shake out is that you fish, which is you grabbing 5 tokens from the bag, and it is a solo bag builder, which I quite like the bag building mechanic as well, which you have in some of your games too, Carl. So that you draw out of the bag and you then place onto your ship the amount of tokens that your ship can hold, and then the rest go into what they call the deep sea or the ocean. You also have the open waters, and you cannot generally fish from the open waters. And why you would do that is because what happens is that's the start of your turn. The middle of your turn is where you determine what fish you're going to sell back to the market, what fish you're going to trade in for upgrade cards. When you trade fish back to the market, you might need to spend 1, 2, or more fish at one time to be able to can these specific fish. And the cool thing that the game does is on one side of the token is the fish symbol. So it's sardines or mollusks or prawns or squid. And on the other side is a can. It's like you've canned them. So it's like, think of John West canned tuna and things like that. You spend fish tokens to can them, or you can spend them to get upgrades. And I'm going to talk about these later in a sec, because I think having the upgrades is actually what assisted me in being able to complete the first couple of missions. Each of the missions will have different directions, will have different ways that you need to sell your goods. It might be a whole string of single cans, but they won't get you much money. Or it might be alternating, so you might have to sell sardines and then scallops and then back to sardines and then scallops, but you might need to sell 2 at one time. It might be the fact that you have to sell 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4, or it might be just be multiples all on one. So it changes each time. Now, it is a solo game, so you're not really competing with anyone else, but what you are competing for is to determine how much money that you can make and a conservation point of view sometimes. So a conservation point of view. And this is where I think the game is really, really clever. So shout out to Scotty for coming up with that. When you fish, obviously anything that's on your dock, that goes and you sell it, or you can spend it for upgrade cards. Now, in most cases, you're probably going to sell 1 can, but you might need to sell multiples. And then you can spend either 1 type of fish, 2 types of the same fish, or 2 different types of fish to get these upgrade cards. And these upgrade cards will give you a bonus. Some of them are continuous, some of them are once per round, and some of them are lightning abilities. So you just do that on your next turn. And so you've got to be careful to use it on your next turn. So it might be to grab extra tokens. It might be to see what tokens you've got left so that you can determine which one you're going to put onto your boat. But anything that's not put onto your boat then stays in the ocean. And this is cool. So if you have, and I think I spoke about this last time as well, if you have 2 or more of the same token left in the ocean, what happens then is they effectively breed. So it's the old Uwe Rosenberg, breeding program. So if you've got 2 sardines, you will get to put an extra sardine into your bag. If you have 3 sardines, you'll get to put 2 extra tokens in your bag. So the sum is effectively, multiples minus 1, because you've got to have the 2, obviously, to do that. So that's where the conservation comes into it. And most of the guides you'll have to hit a certain dollar amount. And then you'll also have to hit a certain number of particular species. So depending on the starting value of your of the stock in the ocean, effectively, it'll get harder or easier. And you'll also have a difficult, and then a medium or an easy, and then a more difficult, so normal and easy. And that will be the amount of money that you have to have and the amount of fish in the ocean. And as you go on, if you just have your first ship, you're not probably going to be able to reach it because you're not going to be able to sell enough fish back to the ocean. But the more ships that you have, the more boats that you have, the more fish that you have to draw, because you have to fill all of your ships and the deep ocean as well and the open water. So you have to fill them up. So the more tokens that you draw, the more that you're going to be using, I guess. And then effectively what happens is once you have drawn from the bag, if you can't fill your ships, you then have to take open water tokens. So, yeah, it's really, really, really clever. I've been really enjoying it. It's a game that I'm just leaving set up on my table because you can just play it. It's so easy to set up. It's so quick. I've heard a couple of people talk about this. I think Dan posted once. And then even I put up on Instagram that I was playing it, and all these people are like, oh, that looks really cool. I'd love to play it. Where can I find it? And all that type of stuff. But, yeah, it's really, really good. Carl, have you seen this game played? Have you heard about it?
This is the first time hearing about it. Yeah,
right,
Yeah, so you guys are so good at explaining games. Like I'm going to do a shit job after those two. No, I hadn't heard of that one at all, which is weird. I might just be out of the loop on it.
I've seen photos around of it, and you know what? Like, I don't do much solo gaming. In fact, if I was going to be brutally honest, I do no solo gaming. Like, as in, I dabbled, I've tried it a little bit, but I'm not someone that gets a game and go, oh, I got to play it, and I got to play the solo mode and all that. It's just not my thing. I have tried many times, but the allure of Overwatch and listening to Conor lose his marbles at teenagers is so much more fun. So
we don't know if they're teenagers, okay? Like, they could be grown men like me, which is fair.
No, they're definitely teenagers.
But yeah, the thing is, yeah, I don't do that much, but this has really big appeal for me. Like, I'm actually interested about this because I don't know. I like the theme. I kind of like the fishing theme. I know it's been done before with Fleet and many other games, but I think visually it looks really nice on the table as well. The cards are really clear, and it's just something about it that interests me.
And the boats either have punny names, or it'll be in I think it's
Manuka.
What? No, not
Manuka honey.
Punny with a P.
Punny. I thought you said honey names. So I was like,
not what I call you off camera.
I was going to say there's only like three. There's only 3 different honeys.
No, so punny. So things like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we're going to need a bigger boat or things like that. So references to, or they're in. I believe it's Spanish, in which case I've got no idea what they are. But they sound cool. Like, I put on my best Spanish accent when I'm saying them to myself in my lonely table. But, yeah, I think you'd really like this, 80, because, like I said, there's very little setup. Everything is done. All the missions are completed in a binder book. So all you've got to do is fold it, and it's there. And you keep track of the counters on one section, you keep track of the days on another, and of course you've got a certain number of days to be able to complete these orders, I guess. But yeah, and just by changing up the order that you do things in as you go on, rather than it just being a single row, it almost becomes like a ladder. So you work your way down as opposed to across, and just having that changes things wildly. Sometimes the missions for success are you need to have a certain number of boats or a certain number of upgrades. So having more boats means that you've got to fish more, which means you've got to be more conservative, which means that you're not selling as many fish to the market, which means you're not getting as many upgrades. So it's that nice puzzle of, I want to be able to upgrade my boats, but I need to have money, and they cost money. Yeah, it's really, really cool. I like I said, I really think you dig it. I'm happy to, once I've played through it, if someone would like to take it off my hands, I already offered it to a couple. I think I offered it to Mitch as well. But if someone would like it, just let me know, because once you play through it, unless you're going to try and beat your score or whatever, there's not much else to it. Yeah. Unless they're going to bring out an expansion to it. Once I've played through it all, if someone wants a copy of it, I'm happy to offload it to you. Adrian, you'll have to buy it from Dean. I'm sorry.
It's not on BGA by any chance, is it?
I don't think so. Well, they do have solo games on BGA, can play games solo, right. But yeah, I'm not sure. That would be awesome though for it to be on there.
Carl, do you do much solo gaming? I would envisage that you don't, because you put your time into your own projects. That would be that's just a complete guess.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Like I would say a couple of years ago, if you had asked me, I would have said like, no, not at all. And yeah, generally if I have a downtime where I'm trying to chill, it's either playing the new Zelda or like designing a game. But I think I'm getting over it a little bit. I've dabbled in it more. I can kind of see the appeal. I've had more reasons to like want to relax and chill out, which I think they're like very good at doing. So I think I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think I actually need to do more of it. So
yeah,
actually,
I feel like I do as well, if I'm perfectly honest. So
yeah, it's healthy. I feel like it's like doing a puzzle, but like doing a much thicker puzzle with more things going on.
Yeah. I've said that in even games that don't feel they are puzzles realistically. So I mentioned games like Too Many Bones, which is a heavy game, but it's still in its essence a puzzle because you're working out how do I defeat the baddie with the gearlocks I have and so on and so forth.
Complete sidebar. You just mentioned Too Many Bones, which jogged my memory. We completed the Elder Scrolls. Like we did the first whole thing from the very start through the days to the next section. Then we did the boss and we did the final day in one of those. Granted, you can do it again, and we've only explored one of the maps because there's 6. But we just when we had the option to move maps, we decided to just stay on the same map because we had an exploit that made we could control the weather. So we were like, we're not leaving here. So yeah, it was great. It was the boss though, man, it was hard like playing that end. But we were very lucky though, Carl, because we had a class in our team that absolutely obliterated the boss, and that was the Bard. The Bard sung strong and changed the game. And we were talking about it for a good while afterwards. Like if we didn't have the Bard, that we would have been so wrecked. And it was great. It was really cool to see it come to light at the end. So yeah.
I feel like Bards have made such a good comeback. I'm glad to be part of it. Even if it's only a small role. It's so good to have Bards back. Yeah.
That's it.
That's right.
Cool. Yeah. What about yourself, Carl? What have you been playing recently? If you've had the chance to play anything else other than designing and crunching data and numbers on spreadsheets?
For sure. Yeah, this is always tough to pick a sizzle, right? And I've been pretty good about playing games recently, so I was having a hard time deciding. A couple like honorable mentions. I did play Unconscious Mind. I played Kinfire Chronicles, which a couple that I was definitely like getting off my list. They're very good. But as I was listening to you guys, I made my official pick. The reason being, the game I'm going to sizzle to sort of build some tension here. This is why I'm picking it. One, the designer's name is also Carl. Okay. The theme is aquatic. So I'm going to, build off of what Conor was doing. We talked about asymmetry. This game is uniquely asymmetric. I think that covers it. So the game is called Kelp. Have you seen this one?
Yeah.
Mate, I am so annoyed I didn't back this game. I want it so bad.
Yeah. Slick. And I did get to talk and work on this game when it was in playtesting with Carl Robinson. I also, fourth reason, new designer, which I love supporting, and a new publisher who did an amazing job out of the gates, production-wise, getting the word out wise. So I always like
concept as well.
Yeah, such a cool concept. That's what drew me in. I mean, that's why I like raised my hand. I'm like, I'd love to play test this. And Carl did an awesome job. The game is generally about an underwater classic battle between the shark and the octopus. And, per that earlier question of intertwining theme and mechanism, I mean, just such a good job of doing that. The octopus is sneaking around trying to avoid getting eaten while also making sure he's trying to find food for himself, and the shark is on the hunt. You've got, the shark is sort of doing a bag building thing while the octopus is more doing a deck building thing. I think I might have just got that backwards. But it's just such a cool game of like bluffing and intrigue with some common mechanisms that'll feel familiar to gamers. Again, totally unique, 2-player only, which is of course like a little bit risky in the market when you only have a 2-player mode, but it works so well that it makes it even better. And I think trying to do more than that, it would have been a mistake. This game shines it too. It's great for any couple that likes to game together, or parent and child gaming. It's just great. And it has this ability to crescendo. as a lot of games with this sort of hidden information often do, there's always these moments of just incredible fun anxiety where you're barely sneaking around the octopus, or you're the shark and you think you know where the octopus is and you're wrong. And I don't know, it's just really clever idea. Beautiful production. It has these like mahjong style tiles that are just, sometimes that just makes a big difference when it feels good. These like beautiful aquatic mahjong tiles that the octopus has on the board. I don't know, just super slick and not huge either, like a nice small profile game that doesn't take up, Merchant's Cove style, your entire luggage to move around. So yeah, just awesome, cool, unique design. I love when people take a chance on something a little bit different, and they definitely did here, and they knocked it out. So I don't know. That was the game that like stuck with me the most that I've played recently. There's some other awesome games I've played recently, but that one was like, yeah, can't say I've played anything like this. How many 2-player, highly asymmetric games are out there? There's not that many in the board game space. So that's my sizzle. Would definitely recommend checking it out, especially obviously if you do a lot of 2-player and just want something different. I mean, I also played the new Duel game. Was it Duel for Middle Earth? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah. I have it
obviously, it's an amazing game, right? But it's really a build off of other things we've seen. It's incredible. So that's another one, obviously. But Kelp by Carl Robinson. I think they're called Wonder Bow games.
Yeah. That's one of my Kickstarter like regrets that I didn't back it, because at the time I don't know why I didn't back it. I think I was thinking maybe that I would predominantly play it with MJ, and I just don't think that she would have been into it, like as in that sort of real high sort of, it is a sort of battle-y kind of a war-y game in a weird way, because it's like you're 1-in-1 and you're trying to outmaneuver opponents and stuff. I just didn't think she'd dig it, but I think now she would, and obviously I haven't backed it. But I don't know if it's going to go to retail. It should go to retail, fingers crossed. However, I do have something controversial to talk about it, if that's okay. Nothing bad or any besmirchment on the designers or the people behind it. However, I remember it being like a big thing because the files or something got ripped off from the factory or something, and it was like on Temu, and it was on all these little hooky websites. I mean, obviously I never purchased it from there or anything, but it does, security around like board game design files and things like that must be very nerve-wracking when things like that happen to people. And especially, like you said, Carl, it's a brilliant design. The guy has put his heart and soul into it, and it's unique, and it's their first Kickstarter, and it looks amazing, and it did really well. And yeah, man, like my heart goes out to those guys with stuff like that happening, because it just, even if people don't back it, even if people don't back the Temu rip-off stuff, the stress levels and the anxiety and the drama and the trouble that comes with that is like completely unfair. So
that was really terrible, and it definitely makes you think about like who are you, and like why are you so evil that you would ever do that?
100%.
It's like so niche and weird that you'd go out of your way to do that. So I don't know, it's one of those things, like special place for that person who did that. And yes, and same thing for the publisher. Yeah, I can't imagine being relatively new, if not totally new to the publishing industry, and that being your first experience. I mean, that's a lot of sleepless nights. So even more reason to sort of support them. I know they got some really great support from the community, which was well deserved when that happened, and they powered through it. So good job.
Yeah, man, kudos to them. For sure.
So on another podcast that I listened to, The Secret Cabal, they talked about this. I can't remember who it was, if it was Jamie or Don, and they said that it would be really cool. And again, without knowing Carl Robinson at all, or Wonderbow Games, sorry, if this was like Unmatched, where you just had then different factions with different asymmetric powers that would then be able to compete against each other. So you've obviously got octopus versus shark. What if you had
giant squid
or penguin or orca? I mean, I just play orca all the time, or manta ray. Like that would be so cool, man. And then what you're doing then is you're tapping into something like everyone knows animals, right? Mm-hmm. You're not having I don't know these characters from Unmatched, or I don't know these characters from Disney or Marvel. It's like everyone knows these sea animals, and it'd be so cool if they could come up with even just one at a time, because you would have a far greater idea of balancing with asymmetry and talking to people like yourself and Sam and Nicole and balancing it. But I think it would be cool if they just even released one new faction a year or something like that.
I think I had a similar conversation with Carl over Facebook at some point because, isn't it funny how sometimes those like amazing ideas are relatively simple? It's not like I've never thought about animals fighting before. I think I've thought a lot about animals fighting before, but for whatever reason, I haven't necessarily thought about doing what they did. But how cool would that be to just basically take well-known animals, which we all know sort of have their own inherent qualities, attributes, powers, and put them in an environment and let them have some fun. I mean,
even if it wasn't Kelp, right? Even if they just did a different game, like, hyenas versus rhino or whatever, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
Animals have disturbing abilities to scare, to lure creatures in to get their prey. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, Mother Nature is a wild beast, and there are some crazy animals, even like bacterias, like, and cells and things that do other things to other organisms, and that, like, the sky's the limit with stuff like that. It's crazy. So
I mostly want something like this so I can take more board games into my school classes and have an excuse to play
as an excuse. Games. It's a science game, obviously.
Yeah. I'll have 15 copies of Kelp, thank you, and I'll play it. With my
hey kids, class. Do you want to play Snake versus Kookaburra? Like, it could be a thing. It could be great.
It'd be awesome.
Yeah, fun. Keep brainstorming on that. Like thinking about what mechanism pairs best with which animals, what would the animal be in a board game setting? It's a fascinating discussion. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that is all our sizzles. Thanks for that, Carl. Appreciate it. That was Kelp, everybody. We will move on to some news and announcements before we move on to a question of the pod.
Transform your gaming experience with the Table Flippers. The Table Flippers specialise in handcrafted custom game tables that turn your living space into the ultimate gaming arena. Designed for style and functionality, their tables are guaranteed to elevate your game night. Visit thetableflippers.com.au to explore their stunning designs and to order your premium game table today.
So some news and announcements. We have the Board Game Barbecue Game Day in Brisbane on the 16th. That will be like 3 days from when this gets released. It's got all the teachers on after game. Everything's ready to roll. Super excited. I actually think this is going to be the biggest game day we've done in Brisbane ever, which will be interesting. We've actually got a second space, like a little room next door, so we can run a few bigger games that might require a little bit more intimacy and a little bit more quiet time. I'm running Age of Steam, and MJ right next to me is running Escape Plan, so that will be fun. And then we also have launched the PlayCon tickets. And look, it's kind of rumors have floated around a little bit already that so many people tried to buy the tickets on the same night. We actually crashed the server. So well done, community. We can be proud of that.
Yeah.
That's something to be proud of. We had technical support going on. The poor guy who dealt with all our technical support, his name's Mark. He was at a Coldplay concert trying to dial in and fix it all up. And what a legend. Massive respect to those guys that dealt with that. And yeah, I mean, what a wild night. Connor hung out in the Discord with about 45, 50 people, all just talking stuff and reminiscing about PlayCon and things like that from the previous year. And it was just a really magical moment. Like, we were talking about this earlier, how being a room with all these people playing games is infectious and it's just so nice to see. But even just everyone running around, going around the room and talking about what they enjoyed from last year's PlayCon was just like super like emotional. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, wow, like we've made this thing and everyone loves it and they get together and they have a great time. And the group from Perth that came out who had all their shirts are already designing their next year's shirts. And that is so cool. I can't wait to see those. Like, I'm so excited. And I took my selfie with one of the people from their group, and I'll do the same thing next year. And I hope for many, many years to come, we can take our photos together with our different shirts on and stuff, which is so cool. But yeah, tickets are live. And I am going to say this. I know we say it quite a lot, but get your tickets ASAP because we don't know how long they'll last. Con.
Play Con. One of the cool moments that's come out in the last couple of days was the individual who got our first ticket, Ree from Board All the Time, sent a picture to Dana of her. She printed it off and put it on the PlayCon site, and she had a big smile and she was super happy. She was just saying how excited she was to go because she had missed the last one. So yeah, that was really cool to see, and the excitement behind it's been awesome.
That was really cool. Like, and we laughed about it in the Discord, like who's going to get the first ticket, and then it went to 8:00, and then everything started to crash. And no one could get tickets. And I was driving home from work. I ended up having to work late, and I walked in, and G Money and Matt Woods were here, and they were like, "We can't get on to get tickets." And I'm like, "I know, I'm trying to fix it. Give me a second." I just ran into the office, dumped all my bags down, straight on the phone, like trying to fix it all up, and we got it done. But yeah, it's live, it's going, and we are very much looking forward to PlayCon 2025, and that is on the 11th to the 13th of July. So yeah, jump on to play-con.com and grab your tickets while they're still there.
And the T-shirts.
And the T-shirts as well. The T-shirts are phenomenal. We're very lucky this year to work with Sam Phillips, who's doing our charity T-shirt, and he's done a high fantasy cyberpunk elf. And she's got like a laser gun and all this cool tech armor with like meeples and stuff all drawn over it. It's phenomenal. So yeah, we are eternally grateful for that. And Sam nominated his charity of choice, which is on the PlayCon site. So you can see where those proceeds will go to.
Wait, can I get one of those in America?
We will try and hook you up with something, bro. We'll sort something out for sure.
Sounds like I need you guys can see the one I'm wearing. The logo is fading off. I wear it too much. Yeah, I need a new one.
Carl's wearing a Board Game Barbecue shirt. Such a cool.
There's a simple solution: is you come.
There is that.
Let me grab my tickets. I'll tell my wife I'm on my way.
Yeah.
So we'll just go on to the question of the pod. So last week's question was, how do you manage a board game slump? Now, I wasn't on this episode, but me personally, I feel that just I've done it before, and it's just cutting it off. Like for me, it's like I just go cold turkey. Like I'll play video games, I'll do other things, and then when I go back to playing games, I'm super excited and super interested again. And it might have been only like a 3 or 4 week period, which is quite a long time in reality when you think about it. But all of a sudden I'm super interested, I'm super engaged again, and I might have a stack of 3 or 4 games that I do have that I want to play, and I want to table with others. So I'm happy to put the effort in and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I'm very, very lucky that my closest and best friends are in my group. And they are very active in, to keep the group going, and we all hang out and we have a beautiful time. And that sort of friendship has grown into other things and blossomed into, hanging out and doing things with families and having the kids around and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, for me, it's just, even just hanging out with those guys, not playing board games makes me go, we need to play this game next time. And then, I bounce back and just super keen to hang out and play games with the guys. So. Connor, would you like to disclose how you feel about Board Game Slump?
I'm going to hold off on my one because it pretty much gets covered in the responses from the community. So I might run through them and then chip in my 2 cents, and then we'll.
What about yourself, Carl? How do you go with a Board Game Slump? Being a designer in the industry as well, it must be quite a different experience, I would assume.
Yeah, like how do I get out of a slump? Is that kind of what we're getting at?
How do you manage it in general?
Yeah, like there are times where I get so head down on design that I forget to play, and that's really not great, because I do think as a designer you have to keep playing, and it actually can help on the design side too. So I don't know. I said it before, I think, but like the best way for me to just remind myself how fun it is go to a con where all that energy is. There's just that renewed excitement. You meet new people, you play new games. It's just a very renewing experience. And maybe it's just because it's top of mind. I just went to one and it was like, oh man, we banged out like 12 games. We played prototypes. We did all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I'm good now. Like, I think leading up to it, I had probably gone 3 or 4 weeks without playing anything. The easiest way was like, all right, we're off to Vermont. Let's go do this. And oh man, it was wonderful.
Yeah. So like I said, I'll echo your thoughts as well, Carl, and some of our sponsors. So we'll just go off the top. So our good buddy Manny said, buy more games. That might not be possible for some people, but yes, you could buy more games. And he said, I do often find myself getting into a gaming slump, but it's generally short-lived. So that's good for Manny. And here's some funny stories from the last Sydney Game Day if you ever catch up with him and want to share. Jess Rochelle says, inspiration for a particular game will come to mind, and that spurs me to get out, relearn it, and enjoy it again. And then hopefully that keeps going for other games in my collection. Yep, I second that. It would just be like, oh, yeah, I need to play this game. It sort of tickles that itch to go again. Kind of, I guess, like Elder Scrolls for you, 80 a little bit. It was just like the perfect Venn diagram. That.
Well, we hadn't played a campaign game. We'd held off for a while, and then this came in, and then we just binge played it. Like we did the regular group thing, and we kept playing, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. So
yeah, Guppy Jones has an interesting approach. He says, rearrange my games, which usually has me looking at stuff I've not played for a while and triggers me to keep it out and playing again. It's like that front of mind sort of situation. So yeah, I can see that as well.
I actually think that that's a great one, because when you're rearranging your games and stuff, the ones that you're like, I haven't played this in ages, you might like move it to like the top right thing of the calyx of like, need to play this again. Do you know what I mean? So you have a mental note of like, I enjoyed this and I'd like to table this again. So you maybe like put it into a certain space where you can then think, this is where the games go that I want to get tabled. So it has like a nice way to sort of jog your memory about it.
Yeah. Shane C, Melbourne, a member from Bris Vegas, says, focus on another hobby for a little while. The itch to play something will eventually come back, and then I'll play something I know I really like. And that sort of echoed again. I keep using that word echo. It's funny in itself. Throughout the responses. So we've got Whose Turn Podcast says, definitely take a break from gaming for a while or go to Essen. That's not always an option for everyone as well. So seriously, Essen has kickstarted my engagement in the hobby as it acts like a New Year's Eve for board gaming. I guess for me, PlayCon and then going to game days does something similar. You've put yourself in there. It's not, when I say there's no other option to do, like, oh my God, I guess I'll do that. But, there's people there who want to play games. There's people who you want to play games with. There's new games you want to try and all that type of stuff. And I imagine Essen's like that, but, on caffeine. So that would be really cool. Sarah always loses. We'll see about that if you ever play a game with me. Grace and knowing they will always be there when you're ready to have time and bandwidth. Yes, it's supposed to be a fun hobby, right? You're supposed to be doing it you enjoy. Don't try and push and force yourself into doing it. I fully go with that. And I guess it's something that Joe said in his response on last week. Yvonne Spellencust says, taking a break from gaming or playing some smaller games that are easier to get to the table. Don't push yourself too hard and just accept it. So similar, don't go trying to play through a game of Barrage or Weather Machine or something like that. Maybe play something smaller or maybe a solo game. Board Games with Fools says, what's a board game slump? Does not compute. But in all seriousness, take a break and do other hobbies such as mini painting or building Lego. Yeah, so we talked about playing video games, Eddie. That's something that we enjoy. But if you're more tactile or something like that, maybe mini painting, which is a great board game adjacent. I've heard people say they come up with RPG scenarios or work on the next campaign and things like that. So that's probably a good one too. And then rounding out the last few, so our friend Raven, I feel like I've been in a board game slump for a while, so I'm keen to see some responses to help bust out of it. Like another member that I'll talk about in a moment, Stace said, I'm still buying and backing games, so there's no shortage of things to play. I've got Raiders of the North Sea set up on the table to play tonight. maybe playing one of my favorites will get me back into the group. Yes, heading back to an old fave would be good. Let's Dive In says, to manage a slump, I honestly just give into it. I take a break and jump into another hobby I have. I usually only need a week before I'm inspired to pull out another game, but having that break to go for a hike or focus on my garden, they sound like lovely hobbies, really helps me to rebalance and come back the next weekend to a game I'm excited to play. Yeah, that's awesome. So Stace, I should have probably put these the other way around, but I'm in the same boat at the moment as Joe. My daughter seems to be bringing in all sorts of fun viruses home lately, so Joe lamented on the fact that him and his family kept getting crooked from daycare viruses. So to help when I'm in a gaming slump, I seem to just buy more new games. I'm aware that's not an ideal tactic, but punching and sorting new arrivals seems to give me that little game-related endorphin hit, which we all love, when actually getting to play it is not so easy. And then Matt /Snake Oz saying, having a board game slump would suggest that I actually play enough games to consider it a slump when I don't play. Yeah, I sometimes I feel like that too, like you're just not playing many games or whatever. But yeah, I would say I'm similar. I just do something adjacent or something a bit more, I don't know, just palatable for the time being, and knowing that it'll be there when I come back. I think that's important.
Cool. Well, that was all of our answers from this week's question or last week's question of the pod. And we will move on to this week's question of the pod, which will be, what do you consider the best board game that incorporates animals, and what aspect makes you put it at the top of your list? Connor.
Whoa. Look, there's some great ones. I love Everdell because of the art and the city building mechanics. I think it's hard to go past Root for me, honestly. The Carl Van artwork, how it looks so cutesy, but it's so cutthroat in the end. I like how, we talked about how with Kelp it's thematic. There is some theme to each of the different factions. The fact that the woodland is the guerrilla warfare. Even, with the mice, like in the latest one, how they're sort of running amok and there's just a horde of them and they play as a horde, which you can imagine a bunch of mice doing. Yeah, and it's probably a bit of a layup for me, but I'm still going to say Root. It's still, the best game with animals and how they're incorporated into the game.
Yeah, for me, I don't really have like one specifically that came to mind because I'm looking at my shelf and stuff and looking at my gaming history. There's not many games that I play, and there's none in my top 10 that sort of contain like animals. They just don't. However, I do rate the Ratcatcher. It is probably one of the only solo games that I really just sort of have played since talking about it on the podcast. And I like the fact that thematically, I feel like the rats are sort of overwhelming and swarming, almost like if when you see like Indiana Jones and stuff, when there's like thousands of rats running down a tunnel and stuff, it can feel like that. So I feel that the thematic integration of how that works in a game sense, in a tower defense, essentially kind of a game sense, I think it works really well. And I love Matt Aslan's art style. Like, I think it's so cool, that kind of real scruffy, sketchy black pencil and this sort of real magical world that he's created in that game, I think is brilliant. I think it's great. So if I'm going non-anthropomorphic and I'm just going pure animal, I'm going with the rats from the Ratcatcher. Like, I feel that they are creepy, even though some of them have powers and other things. But yeah, because they've had the magic cheese. But like, yeah, I just think that the rats and the way they work are just fantastic. So.
Awesome.
What about yourself, Carl?
Yeah, I think I got a good one here. I'm curious if you guys or the listeners have played this one. There's a Pandasaurus game called The Wolves. Are you guys familiar with this at all?
Yeah,
I am familiar.
Yeah. So this, I'll say why it's special. I think it's a solid game all around, and it's also quite accessible. It has a mechanism in it that I've never seen before, which if you can't tell, I kind of like when when that happens. It's a tile flipping mechanism that essentially dictates the strength of your action on the terrain that you're going to with your wolf pack. Beautiful artwork, nice and clean. Also, I am generally not big on area control, but this game does it in such a good way that it didn't bother me at all in the way that area control sometimes can bother me. It's got thematic integrations. You can like howl with your alpha wolf to take over other people's smaller wolves. You're building dens. But at the same time, it really takes like 10 to 15 minutes to learn. I remember this one too, because speaking of a con, this was one of those games that we actually were able to unpack at the table, never having played before, learn it and play it and not be miserable, right? So we didn't have a teacher and we actually got it done. We got it fully played. We didn't mess up any rules. And we're like, yeah, that's slick. Like I can break that out. It plays in an hour. It's got these really cool wolves in it. You've got like plains wolves, timber wolves. You got like the snow ice wolves. I'm probably wrong on all of those names, but you know what I'm saying? They're like thematically environmental.
Yeah.
So that's my pick. I was thinking about this and I was like, I need to play March of the Ants. I haven't played that. And I was like, I bet that would be a game I'd like, but I've never played it. So I obviously can't say that, but it crossed my mind.
I've backed it.
Me too. Someone was like, it's Eclipse with ants. I was like, yes, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so cool for sure. So, and back to the walls, that's got a great action selection mechanic. How you flip those tiles, like that's very clever.
I love
that. Very fun.
I love it.
Yeah,
never seen it before. Unique. Haven't seen it since.
Nope.
Yeah, doesn't get a lot of 100%. Shout out though. I haven't heard it talked about a ton recently. I guess it's a couple of years old now.
Yeah, cool. Well, that is our answers to the question of the pod. If you'd like to follow us on socials and bits and bobs, you will see that question pop up and we will read some of the replies out at the next episode. We shall now move on to our final segment, which is Fired Up. Just want to give a quick shout out, though, to all our amazing Patreons who make this podcast possible. And you can support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/boardgamebarbecue where we have extra content. We do game nights internally with things like trivia nights and Jackbox party nights where we all just hang out and get to know each other and have a blast. It's an absolute hoot, if I'm honest. They're some of my highlights of when I'm home alone and it's like, they've got a cool Patreon night to look forward to. Sweet. And then we just hang out and it's good fun. There are also other ways to support the podcast without donating. Just tell your friends, like wear a Board Game Barbecue shirt to a massive con in America is a pretty cool one to do. Like that's pretty good. You can leave an Apple Podcast review. Dan reads those out. Like there's a bunch of different things that you can do to support the show. Join the Facebook community, hang out at game day, and all the links to all those different things will be in the show notes. Right, fired up. Man, I am not going to lie. I am fired up about something very specific that I have been waiting for a long time. And on a Patreon episode, maybe 2 years ago, Connor, maybe 3 at this point. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's at least 2. It's at least 2 Christmases ago.
Yeah, this was named our favorite TV show of that year. And that was Arcane. I don't know if you've ever seen Arcane or watched Arcane.
So good.
Yes.
Phenomenal.
One of us.
And it is a game changer as far as I'm concerned in things like animation and also integrating a amazing story from a video game setting because they have not got a good track record of doing that. They just don't. And the story to this is phenomenal. The acting, the emotion, the everything. It is a brilliant show. I cannot stress how good this thing is. But today is the release of the second season. And once we finish recording this and I've done a few little jobs around the house, I am going to start watching season 2 of Arcane.
Hold on.
And I hope to get to bed tonight before tomorrow at 6 a.m. because I've got a feeling that I won't sit on the couch because that's a mugs game. You sit on the couch, you fall asleep. You sit in a computer chair, you don't fall asleep.
Yeah, sure.
And I am super pumped to watch this show. It's not that this is an excuse or a better reason or anything like that, but it's been touted as the most expensive animated TV show of all time. Not that money solves everything, but you know what? If they've got a good story and it's already good and they put a bit more budget behind it, I can't imagine how good it's going to look because the last one looked phenomenal. And the amount of times you go to a convention and you see someone dressed up as Jinx, like that it's like a staple at any con now. Anyone that hasn't watched this show and doesn't do animation, I really beg you, honestly, to just watch the first 3 episodes. And I'd be very happy to have a conversation about it if you didn't enjoy it. Everyone has a different thought and a different opinion on what they do and don't like. But some people might look at this and go, oh, it's animated. It's not my thing. I can't stress enough how good this show is and how massive it was at the time. Yeah, man. I hope I've done it justice in my sales pitch. Netflix, where's my check?
Man, you fired me up. Here's how dumb I am. I didn't realize you guys, I did realize, but you're a day ahead of me. And I'm like, wait, it comes out today? And I'm like, not here, tomorrow. So I was like, I'm supposed to go meet my brother after this for drinks. I'm like, was about to cancel. No, wait a minute. It's actually tomorrow. No. Yeah, that show blew me away.
So good. And it came from a MOBA, which like those MOBA games, they have
no story.
They have lore. They have lore. Like they make lore and there's like, some lore behind them, but we're not talking like 40K. We're not talking about years and generations of history and factions and all this other stuff. We're talking about League of Legends, MOBA game. Like, yeah. I was, and I'm a Dota player. Like I don't even like League of Legends. So when I watched it, I watched Dota 2, the TV show as well. Like I was like, Arcane just eats it alive. It's so much better. So yeah, give it a chance.
For those who don't dabble into the MOBA scene, Adrian's saying he's a Dota player and League of Legends. That's like the Montagues and the Capulets. Like, they hate each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Never shall the two cross. But no, I'm excited for that too.
And Conor, yourself, what are you fired up about?
What am I fired up about? Well, you may have seen me at the Sydney Game Day, and you may have seen me come back with a game I'm excited to play. It is Stefan Feld's new chunky Civ building game, Civolution. So I'm excited to play that. And the other cool part is someone has developed a solo app. So you don't have to use the cards. You just use the solo app. So that's going to be really cool. I'm excited to try that out. That's going to be fun. So hopefully over this weekend I'll be able to play and play with some of the new toys that are in that game. But I'm also excited. If you're going to talk about a TV show, I'm going to talk about something else. I'm excited. The Wallabies, so that's Australia's rugby side, the once world-conquering Wallabies, are kicking off their autumn tour against England. They're a young team. I would love to see Australia get back behind the Wallabies. They've done hard. If you're getting a check from Netflix, I should be getting a check from Australian Rugby, ARU, because I feel like every other day I'm talking about these guys. Yeah, what's up?
You'll get your check when you make the board game, Wallabies versus Lions.
Because that's definitely happened in the natural habitat before, hasn't it? Yeah. So that's what I'm fired up.
Sweet. And yourself, Carl, what are you fired up about, brother?
Yeah, I dropped a hint earlier, but I know, and it's already come out, but I'm still very fired up about it, which is the newest Echoes of Wisdom Zelda game that dropped on Switch. I mean, I'm fired up for a lot of reasons. I love top-down Zelda games. I grew up on them. My kid loves them, so we get to kind of pass the controller back and forth and play through all the game. It's a hark back to Link to the Past, which is like literally my number one game of all time. So we are through the first couple dungeons and taking our time and exploring and, covering every nook and cranny. And I just can't wait to get through the rest of the stories and the dungeons. Been waiting for a top-down Zelda for a while. And not that I don't like the other ones. They're amazing. This made me feel like a kid again. And when my own kid was about 9, I made him play through Link to the Past on his own. And it was this weird, I don't know why I made him do that. It was kind of mean because it's sort of a hard game. I was like, well, I know everything, so you can figure it out. But the puzzles are probably too hard for a 9-year-old. But anyway, we grunted through it, even though he kind of hated me for it at the time. It did work. He loved it, right? And the satisfaction of those old games when you actually make it through, there's a high satisfaction level you get from solving those puzzles and beating Ganon. So to do that again, now that he's 15, but we still get to enjoy that together, I'm pretty fired up about that. That's
man, that's cool.
That's a dad fired up, I guess, version.
I've been playing through that one too, and I've been loving like the Pokemon aspect of collecting the echoes. It's like, oh, I've got you now, and I've got you, and then you find a really powerful enemy. And like I remember, I was able to get a shark. So like, anytime I'm underwater, I'm just going to unleash this shark, and it's just going to eat everything.
Yeah, it's comedic the way you can literally capture one and then just be like, well, now you fight. You have to fight.
You're off finding treasure chests, and they just do all the work for you.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice. Well, that's what we're all fired up about. Please feel free to post what you're fired up about in our Facebook community or Discord as well. That's always nice to see some people using the hashtag fired up and just sending a picture of what they're playing or what they're up to and things like that.
So Shane RC actually posted a picture of Civolution on the Facebook page saying he was fired up. So I'm fired up with you, brother. I'm fired up with you, Shane.
Awesome.
That's it. All right, sweet as. Thank you very much for joining us, Carl. We really appreciate your time and insights, man. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Love you very much for what you do and the whole crew. Really great to be back. Hope to do it again.
Yeah, bro. Thanks very much. And thanks to Con. Thanks, Con, bro. How you doing?
No worries, Donkey. By the way, I think we can say we're Shrek and Donkey when they get the handsome spell put on them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
right.
Obviously.
Yeah,
I thought that
100%.
went without saying, I think.
Thanks, Carl.
I strut like that horse, like do the strut. Like, so I can whinny. All right. Well, good night. Thank you very much. And play more games, everybody. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
This is Adrian from the editing room floor. Now, there was a mistake in the previous episode. Well, even saying that was a mistake because it was in this episode where the mistake happened. I mentioned episode 139 when Carl was last on, but that was incorrect. It was actually 138. I was just so excited to talk to Carl, I got a little bit lost. Thanks for listening, and see you later.